Some of you, hopefully lots of you, will have chosen one word for the year. And the idea of one word that you're going to use as a direction to help you develop as the year goes on. And a week or so ago, the word that came to me was the word connect. Yeah. And I thought, connect, what's that? What's that about? And then I thought, well, it's to do with me connecting more with God as the year goes on, connecting more deeply with God in my personal life. And also, I was challenged to think that connect also meant that in all the different activities I'm involved in, because I'm doing lots of things during the week that are not necessarily church things, that my faith should be connected into those things as well. So that all the places I go, the people I meet with, there should be a connection for me. They're not separate things. And so connecting my faith into and what I believe into all the different areas of my life. And last Sunday, I said to Katie, because I thought I was doing what Ben's doing today, and I said, who's speaking next week, Katie, so that I can chat to them about what's happening? And she said, well. She said, actually, how would you like to speak? I thought, oh, right, okay. Should have kept my mouth shut. Shouldn't have asked. But anyway, I said, yes, okay. And when I looked at what we're going to be looking at today, because the churches of Rising Brook and Cannot Create and ourselves, and no doubt the Open Hands Church as well now, we're all on the same page. We're doing the same kind of thing in the different locations. And this year is a year where we're going to be very much looking at prayer. That's going to be our theme for the year. In different ways we're going to look at it. And so my topic for today was going to be about Daniel. And as I read the chapter where I'm going to be focused today, I thought, connect. This is right. It's right that that's the word for me. It's right that I'm speaking today because it's made me think more deeply about it, and connect just fits, so the two things go together. So I'm going to read, first of all, it's quite a long chapter, and it's going to go up on the screen so that you can help follow it. It's chapter 6 of Daniel, and it's from the Message. And to give you a little bit of background, before this chapter, telling us a bit about Daniel's life, there had been an invasion of Jerusalem. Jerusalem had been overthrown, and some of the young men from Jerusalem were taken to Babylon as captives, and they were going to be trained up and used to serve the king. And Daniel was one of those. He, along with three whom you may have heard of, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those were their Babylonian names, and Daniel was Belteshazzar, but we know him as Daniel. So I'm going to read chapter 6 of that. And as I'm reading, you can be thinking about who's he connecting with as I read it for you. Right. Darius, who was the king, Darius reorganized his kingdom. He appointed 120 governors to administer all the parts of his realm. Over them were 3 vice-regents, one of whom was Daniel. The governors reported to the vice-regents, who made sure that everything was in order for the king. But Daniel, brimming with spirit and intelligence, so completely outclassed the other vice-regents and governors that the king decided to put him in charge of the whole kingdom. The vice-regents and governors got together to find some old scandal or skeleton in Daniel's life that they could use against him. But they couldn't dig up anything. He was totally exemplary and trustworthy. They could find no evidence of negligence or misconduct. So they finally gave up and said, we're never going to find anything against this Daniel unless we can cook up something religious. The vice-regents and governors conspired together and then went to the king and said, King Darius, live forever. We've convened your vice-regents, governors, and all your leading officials and have agreed that the king should issue the following decree. For the next 30 days, no one is to pray to any god or mortal except you, O king. Anyone who disobeys will be thrown into the lion's den. Issue this decree, O king, and make it unconditional, as if written in stone like all the laws of the Medes and the Persians. King Darius signed the decree. When Daniel learned that the decree had been signed and posted, he continued to pray just as he had always done. His house had windows in the upstairs that opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he knelt there in prayer, thanking and praising his God. The conspirators came and found him praying, asking God for help. They went straight to the king and reminded him of the royal decree that he'd signed. "Did you not," they said, "sign a decree forbidding anyone to pray to any god or man except you for the next 30 days, and anyone caught doing it would be thrown into the lion's den?" "Absolutely," said the king, "written in stone like all the laws of the Medes and Persians." Then they said, "Daniel, one of the Jewish exiles, ignores you, O king, and defies your decree. 3 times a day he prays." At this, the king was very upset and tried his best to get Daniel out of the fix he'd put him in. He worked at it the whole day long. But then the conspirators were back. "Remember, O king, it's the law of the Medes and Persians that the king's decree can never be changed." The king caved in and ordered Daniel brought and thrown into the lion's den. But he said to Daniel, "Your God, to whom you are so loyal, is going to get you out of this." A stone slab was placed over the opening of the den. The king sealed the cover with his signet ring and the signet rings of all his nobles, fixing Daniel's fate. The king then went back to his palace. He refused supper. He couldn't sleep. He spent the night fasting. At daybreak, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. As he approached the den, he called out anxiously, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve so loyally, saved you from the lions?" "O king, live forever," said Daniel. "My God sent his angel who closed the mouths of the lions so that they would not hurt me. I've been found innocent before God and also before you, O king. I've done nothing to harm you." When the king heard these words, he was happy. He ordered Daniel taken up out of the den. When he was hauled up, there wasn't a scratch on him. He had trusted his God. Then the king commanded that the conspirators who'd informed Daniel to be thrown into the lion's den, before they hit the floor, the lions had them in their jaws, tearing them to pieces. King Darius published this proclamation to every race, colour and creed on earth. "Peace to you, abundant peace. I decree that Daniel's God shall be worshipped and feared in all parts of my kingdom. He is the living God, world without end. His kingdom never fails. His rule continues eternally. He is a saviour and rescuer. He performs astonishing miracles in heaven and on earth." He saved Daniel from the power of the lions. From then on, Daniel was treated well during the reign of Darius and also in the following reign of Cyrus the Persian. So there's a story that's quite a well-known story about Daniel. And I'm looking today at prayer, at intercessory prayer. There's going to be next week transformational prayer and then wisdom prayer. And so intercessory prayer and Daniel. And intercessory prayer is about praying on behalf of others, praying for others, praying to God for others. So we've got Daniel in Babylon. We've got the other 3 young men there as well. And I'm going to look at 3 ways that Daniel connected. First of all, Daniel connected with God. And that was the word that God gave to me about connecting. Daniel connected with God. There was a rhythm of prayer for him. He was a busy man with lots of responsibilities, lots of other things to do. But he found time to pray to God 3 times a day. And he did that regularly. He'd done it before. He was accused of praying not to the king. And he kept on going with it. When I was a child, and I'll not sing it to you, you'd all walk away. Daniel was a man of prayer. Daily he prayed 3 times, till one day they had him cast in a den of lions. In the den, even then, fear could not alarm him. God had shut the lions' mouths so they could not harm him. And so Daniel praying to God and faithful to God, loyal to God, even when it got difficult for him. But as well as praying to God, Daniel led a good life, a holy life. They couldn't find anything to trip him up with, anything to accuse him of. And that's really, really important, because there's no point in us claiming to be Christians and to trust in God and to believe in God and then live a life that is other than that. because then that contradicts what we say we believe. So Daniel, he connected with God regularly, even when it was difficult. Daniel also connected with other believers. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Early on in the book of Daniel, there's a point where they're to be given special food because they're in the service of the king. And Daniel and the 3 young men decide, no, we're going to eat plainly and ordinarily. We're not going to eat lots of fancy food. We're not going to drink the king's wine. And there was a bit of worry about that because it was the people who were supposed to feed them were worried that they were going to be in trouble for not obeying the king. And these young men started to fail through not having good food. And Daniel had said, give us a chance. Give us 10 days to try this out and watch and see if we thrive, even with the simple food that we want to eat, that's faithful to our God and the diet that he wants us to eat. And that happened. And they were more healthy. They were more strong than those who were being given all the fancy food. And so, he was connecting with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And that was something I kind of hadn't thought of. That in connecting, I connect with God more regularly, more deeply, but connecting with my church family. And because we support one another, we encourage one another. We get a great deal from that time of meeting together. And then after that, as well as connecting with God, connecting with other believers, also Daniel, he connected with the world he lived in. In chapter 9, if you have a look at that, he's praying for Jerusalem. And he has visions of how long the captivity is going to last. And he prays and he fasts and he devotes himself to prayer for his nation. And that's another connection. We're Christians who go out into the world and we see things and we notice things, and those give us food for our prayers about the people we know close to us, the people in our community, and our world, where obviously there are so many worries and so many problems. And because Daniel lived a good life, he had influence. He was listened to. The king makes a decree that people should worship the God of Daniel because of Daniel's witness. I once read somewhere, what you are speaks so loudly that I can't hear what you are saying. And that's a challenge. We can't say one thing and live another. We have to be, there has to be integrity in how we are, and our faith has to go right across all of those areas. So really, what I want to say, that in this new year, let's cultivate the habit, the attitude of prayer. Prayer for ourselves, prayer for our families and friends, for our town, our country, for the world. Let's pray in times specially set apart, as well as in the ordinary walking about day-to-day life where we see issues and we notice people in distress. We see things that are wonderful. Thank God for them. So an attitude of prayer that's set aside specially, but also just in our whole of our life, an attitude of connection with God. I wanted just to read something that I came across this week. Prayer is like breathing. We need to breathe to stay alive. We have to do it every day, all day. We couldn't survive without it. It would be unthinkable. But sometimes we try to. Would it be enough to just breathe for an hour and a half every Sunday morning? Or just to have a special time of sharing air together every Wednesday evening in each other's homes? We need to breathe more than that. Even 20 minutes of quiet breathing time every morning wouldn't be enough. We need to do it all day. So it is with praying. Prayer is vital to our spirits as air is to our bodies. For those still not convinced, try this simple test. Place one hand over your nose, the other over your mouth, and don't remove them until next Sunday.